city law enforcement agencies working together on finding solutions for residents to be safe, along with community neighborhood groups. If there is a question tonight that you would like to ask one of our guest speakers, please press *3 and you will be entered into the queue to ask your question. We would like to introduce your host tonight, Congressman Bobby L. Rush, to begin with opening.
Good evening, and thank you, Letitia. And thank you for joining us for this vitally important virtual town hall meeting where we are addressing the unprecedented surge in carjacking in Chicago and also in the 1st Congressional District. Carjackings in Chicago have skyrocketed during the COVID-19 pandemic, reaching a 20-year high in the year 2020. That number more than doubled citywide from 603 in 2019 to more than 1,300 in 2020. The trend is continuing in 2021. Since the beginning of the year, there's been more than 150 carjackings in Chicago. That is at least 5 carjackings every day. And many of those offenders don't even know that under certain conditions, this crime that they are committing is a federal crime. It's unclear what's behind the increase, but authorities say many of the perpetrators are young adults in their teens, as well as juveniles who face a less serious legal consequences. But what is clear is that we must all work together to solve this problem, not just to stop the crime wave, but to save those young people, some as young as 12 years old, from following those who will lead them down a path and that will ruin their lives as well as those of their victims. I've asked the group assembled with us tonight here on this panel to meet with me and you to discuss this issue, to seek solutions, and to provide directions to all of us as we confront this issue. Today I'm joined by U.S. Attorney John Laws of the Northern District of Illinois, Cook County State's Attorney Kim Fox, Chicago Police Department First Deputy Superintendent Eric Carter, and FBI Special Agent Emerson Rui, and last but certainly not least, Steve DeJoy, the founder of the Community First Safe Park Initiative. This panel of leading law enforcement officials and community stakeholders is here to answer any questions that you may have about the efforts being made through federal, county, and city government agencies to combat vehicular hijacking that's occurring all across the city, and especially the South Side and certainly the South suburban community. Thank you so very much, and we look forward to your to this discussion. And as we say in Washington, I yield back balance of my time.
Great. Thank you, Congressman Rush. I'd now like to introduce each guest speaker individually, and they each have some talking points that they'd like to discuss tonight. First up, U.S. Attorney John Lausch. Sir, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much for having me. And Congressman Rush, I'd like to thank you and your staff for putting this really important call together for your constituents. I think we are all appalled and shocked at the number of carjackings that we've seen in 2020 and already so far in 2021. And one of the key points that I hope everyone gets from tonight is how important it is for all of us to work together, both on the law enforcement side and then law enforcement working with the community in order to try and end this significant increase in carjackings and related offenses. And from the federal end, what I can say is this. When we say how can the feds help on crimes like this, and what we're talking about primarily are opportunistic crimes being committed by emboldened offenders. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of the offenders, they do not fear getting caught, or if caught, they don't fear the consequences of potentially getting caught. And so from an enforcement end, what are the things that we can do? From the federal end, first, we can add additional resources to work with our local partners, here the Chicago Police Department in particular. More FBI agents to help with intelligence gathering and putting together better cases and bigger cases of individuals who are doing this as far as a pattern goes. Also ATF to help with firearm tracing and the like. And then the second part is prosecutors that we help with in particular are the consequences part. It is bringing charges when they are appropriate and then ultimately ensuring that there are consequences so that the people that are committing these offenses are not able to harm others, both immediately and then potentially down the road. So I'm happy to answer questions as we go forward. And I thank you very much for inviting me to be here because I do think there is an important federal role to assist our state and local partners here in trying to put a dent in this problem.
Great, thank you, sir. We'll move on to our next guest speaker, Cook County State Attorney Kim Fox. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me, and I echo John's sentiments in thanking you, Congressman, for putting this together, and for the other panelists being here tonight. This is truly an all-hands-on-deck situation as we deal with the astonishing number of carjackings that we've seen from 2020 bleeding into 2021. It is a situation that has many of us fearful. I speak as a parent who has a daughter who is out there driving. There's a real fear for her safety. And so the fear is real, matched with the numbers that we have seen. But as John Lausch just said, the solution to this are the people that you see on this panel who are working together in law enforcement and also working with you in the community. My role as the prosecutor on the county level, as opposed to John on the federal level, is that we receive cases once an arrest has been made. And I think that's critically important for people to understand how the process works. When we're talking about a carjacking, we're talking about someone who takes a car from another while they're in it by force, whether that's by the threat of force or by the use of a weapon, and take off with their vehicle. What then happens is that the police must make an arrest of the person who took that vehicle to arrest someone for a carjacking. A lot of times we confuse some of the language when we're talking about this. Possessing a stolen motor vehicle, like so they find the car hours later, they have to trace that the person that they found that car with hours later is the same person who stole the car in the first place or who jacked the car in the first place. Once they make that determination, and by they I mean the police or our law enforcement partners, they then bring the case to the state's attorney's office to make a determination whether we will prosecute. So arrest must be made first, then we make a determination as to whether someone is prosecuted. On the cases involving adults, we have a unit called our Felony Review Unit that looks at those cases and assesses a felony charge. And in the cases that are brought to us by the Chicago Police Department, in over 90% of the cases, we approve felony charges. On the juvenile side, Illinois has the Juvenile Court Act, which says that juveniles under the age of 18 for these types of offenses must go to juvenile court. And in juvenile court, we make a determination if we're going to file charges. We file charges in about 80% of those cases for carjacking. And then they go before a judge to make a determination as to whether or not that juvenile will be held in custody or released to a parent. We give all the information to the judge about their home situation, about any arrests or convictions that they may have had in their background, any information that may show that they pose a risk to themselves or others, and a judge makes a determination as to whether or not that child is going to be held in custody or released. On the adult side, once we make a charging decision, they go before a judge for what we call a bail hearing, bond. And we present evidence to the judge about their background, again, much like with juvenile. Any arrests, any convictions, have they been a flight risk, have they caused harm before? And a judge makes a determination as to whether or not someone will be held without bond, given a bond, or given some other condition like electronic monitoring. And so as we look at all of this, our role is to work closely with our partners in law enforcement, Chicago Police Department, our suburban police department, as well as with our federal partners, to help build strong cases so that once we make a charging decision, that we're able to go into court and hold people accountable with the finding of guilty and a sentence that's appropriate. But all of this requires law enforcement working together, victims and witnesses coming forward to tell what they've seen or heard or know, to make sure that we can present the best cases possible. And that's what it's going to take right now, is a true all-hands-on-deck approach from all of us in law enforcement and all of you in the community to address this serious surge in crime, because it is truly unacceptable what's happening in our communities right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Up next, Chicago Police Department First Deputy Superintendent, Eric M. Carter. Thank you for joining us tonight, Eric.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. Part of the Chicago Police Department's response to the rise in vehicular carjackings has been the creation of a carjacking task force that we've instituted between our metropolitan Chicago area law enforcement agencies, suburban departments, the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, U.S. Attorney with John Lausch, the ATF, as well as the FBI, and community groups. As you can see, it's a holistic approach. It's not just a one-sided law enforcement type of approach, because we know we're not going to arrest our way out of this situation, but hopefully working together with community groups, the prosecution side from the criminal courts, as well as our federal partners, that we may be able to address it holistically and also provide services for those that are out here doing the carjacking. We've noticed that the rising number of people that we are encountering are youth between the ages of, as the Congressman said, as young as 12 all the way up to 25, but the median group is between 15 and 20 years old. It is very, very difficult to for the victims of carjacking to identify people right now due to, obviously, everybody's wearing a mask due to COVID. So the prosecution side, we're taking a hit on trying to get most of the victims to be able to identify the offenders. That is something that we're trying to work heavily on, but we are supplementing that by increasing our staff. And as I said, we create a carjacking task force of additional 40 officers in the detective areas, as well as 4 sergeants to supervise them. So every area of the city has their own carjacking task force. To supplement that, we've also increased our area technology centers. Those are the video retrieval centers and SDSC rooms in every district to try and find that video that will help and aid us in prosecution to be able, as Kim Fox said, tracking them from start to finish to make sure that the offender that originally stole the car is the offender that we actually catch in possession of the car later on. So we've beefed up all of those resources to ensure that we get the best prosecution when possible. But the other aspect of this is that we're working with community groups. We're working with community groups through our CAPS program, but through our neighborhood coordination officers and our neighborhood policing initiative to identify community groups that can provide services on the front end. Once we have identified potential offenders, whether they be juvenile or adult offenders, we're trying to make that intervention while also on the prosecution side to help them get services or, give them another path in life. So we're looking at it from those standpoints. And, you know, the consequences for parents of juvenile offenders when the child is apprehended, it's kind of hard. We're looking at trying to get the young people to understand that they're jeopardizing their future for a joyride by having a felony conviction or vehicular hijacking on their record. It makes the path to success in life a lot more difficult. So in that, those are some of the steps that we're doing. You know, we've increased our traffic enforcement throughout the city. We have our community safety team, which is our citywide teams concentrating on the south and west sides, which are seeing the highest increase in vehicular hijackings. There's no part of the city that is immune from the vehicular hijackings, but they're concentrated mostly on the south and west side. So we've increased our presence there, increasing our traffic stops greatly to ensure that we're making the most contacts to try and prevent the vehicular hijackings. We have a heavy presence of CPD in the communities hardest hit, and we're doing steps to promote community engagement. We're looking for the ministers, the teachers, community service organizations to be able to get out here and help us be our eyes and ears, as well as the violence interrupters or street outreach workers to be able to get out here and try and talk to these people who are behind it, whether it be juveniles or adults, to try and stem the tide. So we're using every resource that we have to be able to address the vehicular hijackings.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric. Our next guest is FBI Special Agent in Charge, Emerson Bowie. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, and good evening. First off, thank you, Congressman, for putting this panel in this town hall together. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to participate to further affirm that the FBI is standing in a holistic approach with the other panelists and their agencies that they represent, as well as the community, to address this problem. I don't believe it can be overstated enough that everyone recognizes this is a problem and everyone is concerned and everyone is putting forth resources in the best effort possible to slow down and lessen this crime problem that is ongoing in our city. This is a crime that is nationwide. So this city, just like others, are not immune to what is going on. However, with this surge that we're experiencing, we're taking it serious and we're employing all the techniques we have available to us to address it as quickly and as rapidly as possible. I think it's already been described, various approaches that are being used, so I don't think I need to restate that the task force concepts are being initiated, not just with law enforcement and prosecutors, but with the community. And I think it's important to also state that as we investigate these opportunistic crimes that are going on, we're not just going after the individual that do it. If we can make other connections to determine if there is some conspiratorial acts that are present, that we will pursue those as well. So this job would not just stop with a singular arrest. We're looking into every possible reason or plot that may have missed for people to be committing these crimes for whatever reason. So thank you again for allowing me to participate to assure the community that we're taking this very seriously and we're standing with the community and the other law enforcement partners and prosecutors to try and resolve it as quickly as possible.
Great. Thank you, Special Agent in Charge, Bowie. Our last special guest this evening is from Community First State Pump Initiative, Stephen Dujois. Thank you for joining us tonight. Stephen, are you with us?
Thank you very much. And the leaders you have here tonight, I think, represent the commitment collectively of government to try to make an impact and resolve this. But this issue didn't start with COVID. It didn't start just 2 months ago. But I think what we're seeing is a coming to a head of the economy, the frustration of the youth, and I think the overall disparities that we see in our communities. And I think it's coming to form of the carjacking. I came to be involved with this a couple of weeks ago, maybe almost 3, as I started to getting reports from residents of Hyde Park and around the city of incidents of violence and carjacking. And so as I got involved, we decided that we would like to create a line in the sand in locations around Chicago to provide at least a 2-hour window of safety to those that want to fill up and access the pump. And so groups of men and women, mostly black men, began to offer themselves up for 2 hours of volunteer service to stand collectively and guard against carjacking. Now, we're not there as vigilantes. We're there to provide awareness and prevention, of course. But I think what we're seeing is that when community comes together at stations, those stations are generally bypassed by offenders. And so, while a strong law enforcement and judicial consequence and more robust consequences for joyriding, and actually I think defining it for what it is, armed vehicle theft, I think is required. But I think when you see the community come out on corners and stand there in solidarity, I think you'll see the carjackers move on to other locations. So what we're proposing in our group is vigilance, awareness, and prevention. But on a larger level, what I've been told by many of those who've been attacked and harmed by carjacking is that they're jacked a second time when it goes to apply for the insurance coverage and the policies that they have to recover their vehicles and bring them back into conditions that they were in before they were jacked. And so I've had several people contact me, and we're going to get further into that hopefully in this call, that say the process of reporting the carjacking, getting the insurance claim filed, and then getting your car recovered has been problematic. And so I think the issue goes far beyond just the incident itself. The safety factor for people who have been carjacked, their keys are gone, their ID is gone, their homes are now suspected of being surveilled, and we've gotten several reports that that's occurring. So I think it's a larger issue than just the vehicle being taken and why. Now we've got to support the victims through the process of resolving their insurance claim, feeling comfortable in their own community again, and then with the kids that are doing this, what we want to try to provide is an access to some alternatives to jail. Mach 1 Mentoring is a group that helps teach car repair to kids. And so instead of carjacking cars, we want to teach these kids to repair cars and maybe give them a vocation. So that's our solution. And we're glad to be a part of any effort by government, county, and state. But it's definitely an all hands on deck scenario. And the tales that we're getting from the community are shocking.
Great, thank you, Stephen. We do have some poll questions this evening that we would really encourage everybody to participate in, and you do that by simply pressing the corresponding number on your keypad. So our first question this evening, do you find this town hall informative? Go ahead and press 1 for yes, 2 for no, or 3 not sure. Again, do you find this town hall informative? 1 for yes, 2 for no, 3 for not sure. And also, just a reminder, folks, that we are taking your questions this evening. So if you do have a question and would like to ask it to one of the members of our panel, go ahead and press star 3 on your phone keypad. That'll get you in the queue to speak with one of our staff. And from there, the next time you hear your name, you will be live on the call. So we are going to go to the phone, and we're going to start taking some calls for our panel. And our first caller this evening is Jeffrey. Jeffrey, you are live. Go ahead and ask your question, please. Jeffrey, are you with us? Okay, it looks like we may have lost Jeffrey. So we're going to go to the next caller, and it looks like we have Leonard. Leonard, you are live. Go ahead and ask the question.
Yes, I did ask the question. I was concerned because I was reading the paper where Superintendent Brown was stating about these kids that was 12 and 13 years of age, especially these little girls, about what the parents, where were the parents? And I was asking the question about we need to do something as far as dealing with the parents also, trying to get them to be concerned about the well-being of those kids, because they're messing their lives up and locking them up or just, putting them through a lot of issues, and they turn out being that much worse. But then another question I wanted to find out was that are the cars being found, because I know some years back there was some stealing going on and the cars was being shifted out into some other areas for sale.
Thank
That's
you,
the
Leonard.
question.
Who on the panel would like to take that question?
This is First Deputy Eric Carter from Chicago PD.
Yes.
As far as the recovery of the vehicles, the vehicles have been recovered all over, not only in the suburban areas, but here in the city, as I said, primarily south and west sides of Chicago. But as far as them being organized type of car theft or international ring of shipping the vehicles out of the country, out of the state, we haven't been able to identify that as of yet, but that is a possibility that we are looking into. So just to give you that, we are looking at every possibility of whether it's organized ring, theft ring, but most of the vehicles that have been stolen are being recovered here locally.
Great, thank you. We've got the results from our first poll, so let's go to that, and then we'll go back to the phones. Do you find this town hall informative? 76% said yes, 7% said no, and 17% said not sure. So thank you, folks. We will be back with other poll questions throughout the evening, so please stay tuned. Right now, we're going to go back to the phone, and we are going to go to Diane. Diane from Chicago, you're live. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, I want to thank everybody for participating in this call because it is very important. But my concern is that with calls like this, a lot of times you hear a lot of information, but you don't hear practical applications, such as the one group I've only heard of is the community group that's actually providing windows of times that women can go and get gas in their car. That's something that we need to know from the police, the community, everybody. When can we feel safe to go get gas in our car? And do we have a central website for this? What do we need to do? I mean, these are things that are not being transmitted to us, and it's creating a great atmosphere of fear. As an adult, now you feel locked in your house, and I need some practical solutions.
I can answer a part of that question, and one of the most important aspects of what we accomplished last Saturday and the Saturday before was to assemble at the station in Hyde Park and then disseminate our teams to different areas of the city. So groups went to 53rd and 51st and Cornell, some went to 47th and Woodlawn, some 35th and King Drive, and others went to other locations on the south side. But what we found is that between 11 to 1 on those two Saturdays, there were no carjackings at gas stations in those communities. And as soon as those volunteers left, those jackings resumed and shootings resumed. So is it safe to say that community gathering is a deterrent? I think it is. So I would say to the young lady calling, if you would like to check with our website, and we don't have a website, but we do have an email address, communityfirst2021@gmail.com. We'd be happy to direct you to stations that we have safe location times posted for. And we're going to be expanding our program to other areas. But I think, you're right. We need to have some designated times when the community knows there'll be safety at those locations. And then you can adjust your schedules accordingly. But it's just shocking, as we heard ladies say last week, that they have passed by filling up their tanks that are on E because they're scared. And when women are scared, we should all be scared. And we should all be rallying around that effort. I think we're seeing that in the community.
Thank you, Stephen. Anybody else?
Superintendent, let me ask you, I think this is a very, very, very critical question. Does the data show that there are specific times when carjackings occur more frequently, or would you advise certain hours of the day that if you had to get a fill up or get more gas, then you would do it during these hours of the day?
Right now, Congressman, there is no specific time. We are seeing carjackings happening around the clock. It's heaviest in the evening time, between 6 p.m. and, say, 11 p.m. Those are the most prevalent hours. but it has occurred around the clock, but the most prevalent hours are between 6 p.m. and 11 p.m.
I'd like to add a point, if I may. I think this question demonstrates the holistic approach that has to be taken. We have community groups who are doing excellent work, providing windows of opportunity to assist people. I think the first deputy superintendent also pointed out that they have increased patrols and other initiatives to also provide a quicker response and safety. And then from the federal level, we are not as reactive as the police department, so we have to be very targeted in our approach so that we stay within the boundaries of the law and within our authorities. I think when you compound all of those programs together, it gives you more coverage in the short term as well as the long term to try and approach this. It is critical that from a law enforcement perspective, that we do our job correctly and we do it within the boundaries of the law and within the boundaries of our authorities. Therefore, in some instances, we are slightly limited in what we can do unless we have identified specific individuals or we have identified or we're able to identify probable cause to be more proactive before a crime happens or in response to those crimes. So I think it's important for us to understand that all agencies aren't created equal with their authorities, but when we combine those authorities, we have more coverage to move forward.
Great, thank you. Our next poll question, just a reminder, press the corresponding keypad, or the number on your keypad. The question, have you or someone in your immediate family experienced being a victim in a vehicle hijacking? Press 1 for yes, press 2 for no. Again, have you or someone in your immediate family experienced being a victim in a vehicle hijacking? And we'll come back to those results in just a couple of minutes. Right now, we're going to stay with the phones, and we are going to go live to Cheryl from Chicago. Cheryl, you're live.
Hello?
Hi, Cheryl, you're live. Go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, good. Yes, the question I had, someone kind of answered it earlier about, is this a possibility if there's another reason or motive why all the carjacking is taking place? So my other question consists of why is it that they depend, I'm not saying they totally dependent heavily on the community or the activists to get out and help them do watching in Hyde Park, which I don't understand, which we're out there, we're doing it for free. When the Chicago police officers were assigned to that area for the hours they work, the 8 hours. Then you have the Hyde Park police officers there. Then you have security guard police officers there. So those individuals should have been watching in the University of Chicago. So all of them should have been over there watching it, instead of having extra community leaders out doing the work that they should be on watching anyway. So why the police officers could be watching on this? And I heard that the carjacking started almost 2 years ago. So why did they even let it get to a surge and get out of control in the first place and we at this point where we are now?
Well, let me try to answer that if I can. I'm going to say this to you. The police do what the police do. But at the end of the day, this is our community, yours and mine. And we don't have to assume responsibility for where there are gaps in terms of the police. We can't afford to point a finger at the police and say, well, they need to do their job when we can do more ourselves. So the question that I have is, why aren't we doing more? I'm sitting here thinking that we should have, where are the churches? Where are the churches? Could we ask churches to adopt a service station, a gas station in their neighborhood and to help for doing on what my dear brother is doing with this organization? We've got to have, the only way we're going to get a safe community is if you and I commit ourselves and our time to having a safe community. And then we'll give the police something to work with. But I certainly cannot endorse, just blaming the police for what I'm not doing and what other members of my community is not doing.
I've said a couple of times, Bobby, that now is not the time to point fingers. It's the time to hold hands together and try to resolve this together, because that's the answer. You can't arrest out of this situation, and the most important thing is that when we all come together, I hear what the young lady was saying about Hyde Park, and Hyde Park is just like every other community on Saturday from 11 to 1. It's busy. People trying to get their gas, their lottery tickets, and then get home. So that's why we chose 11 to 1, because it's kind of in the morning and a little bit of the afternoon. But I can tell you, groups are forming all over Chicago that are going to cover different hours of the day. We're actually looking at providing access to seniors for escort to check day, because I think, our seniors are so vulnerable when they come to cash checks at currency exchanges that we're going to be probably expanding our scope. I think it all comes back to what Congressman Rush said. The community has to play a part, law enforcement plays a part, and government plays a part. And then the parents of these kids have to play a part, because they're coming home to somebody at night as a 12-year-old and 15-year-old getting dinner and sleeping somewhere. So there is some area of responsibility that we need to be at the doorstep of the parents of these juveniles.
That is absolutely correct. Everyone has to band together to be a force multiplier. There are hundreds of thousands of vehicles around the city, multiple neighborhoods, and to be quite frank, local law enforcement, even combined with other departments and federal law enforcement, is outnumbered. And that is not an excuse, that's a reality. So therefore, it's going to require everybody to have their eyes open and everybody to participate and to assist to create a deterrent at a number of different levels. And that's the only way we're going to be successful.
And as was stated there, the police department in no means is asking anyone to risk their life to prevent anything, but as the gentleman stated, they're helping stand at a gas station. Just a physical presence deters a potential crime or violence or an act of violence, because no one wants to be able to be identified or seen. So most of these crimes are done against people who are by themselves or unaware or not paying attention to their own surroundings. So it's not that we're asking anybody to interdict and put their life on the line, but just your physical presence at the gas station, as the gentleman said. We are stepping up our presence at gas stations, at currency exchanges, near pawn shops, things of that nature, where we know high crime is being perpetrated. But just a physical presence of you out and about in numbers, not by yourself to make you a victim, but in numbers, can have its own deterrent effect against crime.
And the other thing I would say from a prosecutor standpoint, particularly with young people, we're seeing them using social media a lot. For some young people, it didn't happen if they couldn't capture it. And so we've been working with teams on looking at social media. But a lot of us in the communities know who some of these young people are. And I know there's a reluctance to engage when you see something, to say something, because we are fearful of what the ramifications are. And I think it's really important that we empower our community members, our neighbors, our people who know young folks who are going down this path to intervene, whether that's calling your pastor or calling someone who you trust to say, listen, I think this person is engaged in this behavior, because it's absolutely dangerous. Not only young people holding guns, but young people behind the wheel, young people who might find themselves where someone who has a conceal and carry may hurt them. And so I think when we talk about engagement, not just from a law enforcement standpoint, but working with community, in addition to standing out and being out and about, but also I think there's a sense that we know sometimes who's engaged in this behavior, and there's a fear that's involved. And we want to be able to work with the community to alleviate some of that fear, so that these people who are engaged in this behavior, particularly the younger ones, we can intervene. One of the things I hear a lot about is parents. And, having worked in juvenile a long time, we got a lot of parents who are, on the front lines who are these essential workers who are working these hours, whether at grocery stores or driving Ubers and Lyfts to put money on the table, that they aren't home. And so we know that maybe they don't know that their kids are doing this. But if you find out and you tell them and we try to figure out how to address this so that they aren't going to go do the next one, because as U.S. Attorney Lausch has said, a lot of these are crimes of opportunity and they feel like they're emboldened when they can get away with it. And, wearing the mask makes it easier, but we know who those folks are behind the mask. We know who you saw in a car that they're not old enough to be driving. And that is, problematic. And it's difficult. I get it, to want to be in a position to turn someone in. But it is so dangerous. These young people out there engaging in this behavior is dangerous to our whole community, and we need to be able to work together and find ways to be able to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the community.
Great, thank you, Kim.
I'm sorry. If I could share one story, and I could share 30. Congressman Rush mentioned the pastors coming together, and just last week, a pastor in our area, wife was carjacked in Chatham, and in front of her neighbor's house. The poor young man pulled guns on her, got in her face, and she said to me, they looked like they were 10 years old. She got a good look right in their face, and when they spoke, they were articulate, they were polite, and they said, give up the car, and then they pushed her. Then they felt down her bra and breast trying to find money that might have been stashed. So she started running and took off and fell in the snow, and they left her there with the car. 2 days later, the same carjack truck that dropped off the carjackers was circling her block, and she's scared to go back in her house. And this is a pastor's wife. So, no one is immune. The churches are involved, and the community's involved. But we've got to find a way to get these kids into something before they get into this carjacking scenario. And that's why I say, just teach them how to work on cars. America I Can is trying to teach them how to find a better path. There's so many leaders out here committed to helping these kids. We just need to identify them and give them the tools they need to make a difference in our community.
Thank you, Stephen. We do have the results in from our second poll question. Have you or someone in your immediate family experienced being a victim in a vehicle hijacking? Yes, 14%. 86% said no. So we will have another poll question coming up shortly. We do have some questions that have come in online. This question is from Cheryl, and I'm going to actually direct this to Kim Fox. Cheryl wants to know, if the carjacker is a juvenile, what charges do they face and what steps are being taken to find out why the crime occurred?
Yes, so I think it's important that we break down the differences when we say carjacking and people stealing a car. So I think I said this earlier. Carjacking is physically taking the car from somebody else who has the car versus what we would call a possession of a stolen motor vehicle, where someone breaks into a car that's been parked, nobody's around it, and they take it. Vehicular hijacking is the more serious crime. The carjacking is a more serious felony offense. And you're looking at, if convicted of that crime, even as a juvenile, the possibility of going to the Illinois Department of Juvenile Justice or juvenile prison until your 21st birthday. If you are someone who has stolen a car that has been parked that you did not take by force, possession of stolen motor vehicle, also a felony, but a less severe felony than the vehicular hijacking. You can either get probation for that, or you can, based on your background, go to the Department of Juvenile Justice. As part of juvenile court's mandate is to look at young people and see, one, how do we hold them accountable for their actions, and what is it that they need? I think it has been said many times on this call that if you've got a 12-year-old or 11-year-old or 14-year-old who's out there engaging in this behavior, there is something wrong. There is something really wrong, not just with that individual act, but the circumstances in this young person's life. So a judge will make a determination, working with probation in the chief judge's office, does this person need counseling? Does this person have education issues? Are they going to school? And try to fashion a program for that person while still holding them accountable. That might, again, mean that they spent time at what we used to call the Audi home, the detention center, or go to the Department of Juvenile Justice and still have to do some programming to address the conduct that brought them there in the first place. So it is truly a more holistic approach in juvenile court than it is in adult court. And I can't say it enough that was said earlier. The reason that we have to take this approach, particularly with young people, is we don't want them hardened to a system that they go and become better criminals when we just do the punishment without figuring out all the stuff that's happening around them. Because it is not normal for 13 and 14 and 15-year-olds to engage in this type of behavior. So the purpose is to hold them accountable, there's a price to pay for what you do, but also how do we make sure that you don't do this again? And so those are the factors that judges look for, particularly related to juvenile. But for a vehicular hijacking, a carjacking, you can go to the Department of Corrections till your 21st birthday.
Yeah, let me, if I can, I just want to ask the U.S. Attorney, because this is, I found or heard that in the last couple of weeks that some serious carjacking are actually federal crimes. And so, General or Attorney Losh, when does the Federal Criminal Act, when does that become apparent in terms of charging federal violations of federal law? And how does the federal law intersect with what's happening at the local level?
Sure, that's a great question. And so, very practically speaking, if we're going to get involved in charging someone with carjacking or a robbery offense, and there are some federal robbery offenses as well, it is likely going to be somebody who is, first of all, it's likely not going to be a juvenile. There are very limited circumstances where we could prosecute a juvenile. It would likely be if we treated them as an adult. So we're talking about people who are a little bit older, and by the time we get involved, they will likely be somebody who has committed offenses like this on multiple occasions. And so we are talking more about serious punishment and more specific deterrence of those individuals. So for carjacking, for there to be a federal carjacking, not only does it need to be the taking of the vehicle by force, but also with the intent to cause death or serious bodily harm. So it's an additional element that's added in for federal carjacking. There was another, when we have charged some of those, but unfortunately there have been instances where we have seen conduct that, in working with the state's attorney's office, it made sense for us to charge those federally. There's another instance as well, though, and we're seeing some of this now as well. If there is an armed robbery of, like, say, a UPS driver, we had one this past summer, and we've charged that federally. So it's a commercial robbery. It's a robbery affecting commerce. That's something that we can charge federally as well. We recently charged an individual who carjacked an Uber Eats driver. So there was a carjacking charge, but then also the robbery affecting commerce as well. So it is more challenging. We don't have as many tools in the same way that the state does in that regard. But what we do is we use them in a complementary fashion. The people in my office work very closely with the people in Kim's office, State's Attorney Fox's office, to determine where is the best place to charge this particular individual. And sometimes it's because of more stringent punishment or needing punishment federally as opposed to the state side. Sometimes it's because we look at someone and we say, there is something we can do, outside of punishment. There's more of a diversion program. There's something more, a juvenile here should remain in the juvenile system in order to seek additional ways to help that person while still holding them accountable. The last thing I'll say there, and I think this echoes a point that the state's attorney made before, but when we talk about stopping the conduct immediately, really kind of the bond hearing in state court, or what we call in federal court as a detention hearing, but it's essentially the same thing. It's really determining, the main question that we look at is the community going to be safe? And so when we have an individual who has committed multiple carjackings, if we charge them federally, we have a fulsome detention hearing, a hearing where the prosecutor advocates for detention or for release. Their lawyer advocates as well. We have a pretrial services officer who is there to go through the history and characteristics of this person. And as the state's attorney mentioned, we also have a judge who makes the ultimate determination. And what's key, and what I've seen from my years of experience, is that a judge is they don't want to hold people in custody unless they feel that they have to in order to keep people safe. And unfortunately, that happens a lot in federal court because people have risen to that level of what they've done. But instances where people have been able to be released is where they have somebody who will essentially be their caretaker. We have a parent, and I've seen this on multiple occasions, a parent of a 21, 22-year-old who says, it is my responsibility to ensure that this person will not go out and commit more crimes while their case is pending. And so those are all the things we take into consideration federally when we're looking to charge someone, but also whether we're going to seek that they be detained. And unfortunately, we have that instance beforehand. When a judge, the last thing I'll say there, when a judge looks at that issue, the judge weighs the evidence. And so they will only do that in the case where the evidence is strong.
Great, thank you. We do have another poll question for everybody. Again, just press the corresponding number on your keypad. The question, do you currently feel safe in your environment? Press 1 for yes and press 2 for no. Again, do you currently feel safe in your environment? Press 1 for yes and 2 for no, and we'll have those results momentarily. We are going to go back to the phones, and we are going to hear from Mary from New Lenox. Mary, you're live. Go ahead and ask your question, please.
I'm very concerned about locking up 12 and 15-year-olds. And do we understand who they're working for and how these rings are working? Because I truly don't believe these kids are actually the ones who are, brainstorming this whole scenario.
So, Mary, I'll start. I think, and I would ask maybe Deputy Superintendent Carter to follow on. I think what we are seeing oftentimes is there are people that are directing these young kids to do this. These are young kids who have lost their way, and they are committing these crimes of opportunity for the thrill of it. In my heart of hearts, I hope that they don't really understand how damaging this is for the victim of those crimes. I would hope that they would kind of understand that and stop doing it. But that's what we're seeing. We're seeing young individuals who are committing these crimes to take a joyride or to take a car to commit other crimes. And one of the reasons why I wanted to answer this question was to make that point, but also to say, when we learn of instances where there are others that are directing them to do this, that there is a conspiracy, there are more people involved, there are older people involved, that's a particular area where the FBI and our office want to be involved and are involved on this carjacking task force in order to try and hold those people accountable.
Eric, did you have anything to add?
Just as the U.S. Attorney said, we're seeing it across the board. There's no real. It's a myriad of factors. Some, as the U.S. Attorney said, it's just for the thrill of it. Right now, there's no fear of prosecution or retribution, so it's for the thrill for some. Others are doing it, as he said, to commit other crimes, other robberies. We've seen a few incidents of using the cars to steal ATM machines. So there's also the use of the stolen vehicles to commit shootings on rival gang members and rival crews. So it's no one specific instance or reason, but we're trying to address all of those different factors in what we're doing. So that's the biggest thing. Is it's just, if it were just one simple reason, we would probably be able to negate this right away. But it's a myriad of different reasons, and even Kim Fox had stated earlier, there are some instances of these individuals that are doing it as a one-up to rival crews or rival gangs. I've stolen this car, now top me and see if you can get a better car. So we're seeing it just across the board. There's no rhyme or reason to what's really going on. You can't say it's just all economics. You can't say it's economics and lack of opportunity. A lot of it is just, some of it can be social media. Some of it's the thrill with no fear of retribution or for the consequences. It's just hard to put a specific finger on it.
Yeah, thank you, Eric.
I was just going to add, there are a lot of influences, as was stated. Another is the social mediums that these kids are introduced to at very young ages that play an influence as well. You have games out here, Grand Theft Auto, Call of Duty, that sensationalized shootings, they sensationalize thefts and other crimes. And it's only a matter of time before kids who are exposed to this seek additional thrills and sensations. And that's probably an aspect that probably isn't explored enough. And because there aren't maybe enough activities available to them, I think one of the panelists stated, Mr. Dubois said, other avenues and other options presented that could possibly be affecting some of the behavior that we're seeing as well. So there are a number of issues out there that need to be explored. There are a number of things that need to be analyzed to try and present other avenues for these kids to take and other influences to be put forth before them as positive options to what they're doing.
And I would just add, if I could just quickly, this rise, I think it was said earlier by the deputy superintendent that we're seeing in Chicago and Cook County that is so high. We're also seeing it in other places across the country too. So as we look at this analysis, it is not uniquely Chicago. We've got places like Minneapolis whose, carjacking rates have gone up almost 400%. Places like Atlanta, New York. We have, from my office's standpoint, been talking to prosecutors and other folks there as well, because we know that the issues are complicated. We are in this really unique time to try to figure out what's driving it. But I think the point cannot be lost is that it is not just one thing. And Mary, it's heartbreaking as it may seem to think that kids this young would be engaged in such dangerous behavior. The sad reality is that there are a number of young kids who have very much, in fact, been doing this not necessarily at the behest of others, but because the conditions right now are such that they have very little fear of what can happen. Not even just consequences in the justice system, but really their own mortality. This is very dangerous, and we've already seen, where some of these offenders have been killed themselves in the line of this, and that appreciation of risk. Young people don't appreciate risk in the same way that adults do. Their brains aren't developed that way, but it also means that they take these gigantic risks that put us all at risk, and why we have to figure out a way to get them younger involved in services that they need.
Thank you, Kim.
I think when I hear the community, I have a quick comment. The community knows the mechanisms are out there for the legal system. But I think with the frustration that we're all seeing after 188 carjackings in 1 month is there's been no prosecutions, no visible arrests, no preemptive efforts made. Perhaps, it's been considered that big cars might be something to use, but I think what the community really wants to see is an aggressive, robust response in this issue now.
And I would agree with that. And I think one of the things I want to go back to, we can only prosecute once an arrest has been made. And I think the struggle that has been articulated earlier around how difficult it has been, because once we get them, we charge them, is, catching these folks. And that's where we really do need the help. Part of the opportunism of it is if people believe that they are not going to get caught and they won't see a prosecution. So it's not a matter of once they're arrested, they're not prosecuted. We have to catch them. And part of that catching them is, all of the technological things that we've heard about before, but also our community members stepping up and saying, we know who's driving some of this. We want to help too. And so it is the law enforcement piece cannot be extricated from the work with the community in helping us solve this as well. And we have to do all of these things at once. Intervene, get interventions with young people, get them things to do, and also the law enforcement response.
As stated, the arrest portion for the Chicago Police Department, we made over 150 arrests related to these carjackings so far this year. The 200 plus carjackings that have happened, we made over 150 arrests related to them. It's just a issue in trying to get them through the court system. It's an identification issue sometimes for the victim. Can they remember who it was, the description with everybody wearing a face mask. But the Chicago Police Department, along with our state and local partners, we made the effort and are continuing to make the effort to put this on the forefront of our enforcement policy to make as many arrests and put forth as many good prosecutions as we possibly can. So don't think that we aren't. We're doing a yeoman's job as we did last year with over 1,400 vehicular carjacking arrests made last year alone in 2020.
And I'd just like to add, there are a number of investigative techniques being employed at various levels, the local, state, and federal level, to be proactive in trying to conduct these investigations and to bring people to justice so that they can receive services or receive the appropriate penalties when cases are proven in the court system. We have to remember these are very violent offenses in many instances, and we also have to remember that a number of the law enforcement officers who are investigating these offenses, when you do something proactive, there is always the possibility of it turning into a violent confrontation as well. So you want to conduct these investigations, you want to conduct them safely, not just for the officers, but also for the potential subjects or suspects that are involved also. So I would just like to ensure that everyone understands that there are proactive steps being taken all the time, as well as the follow-on investigations to try and, if we can, put cases together immediately, but also in the long term, also to follow up, try and prevent other crimes from occurring by people committing secondary and third offenses.
Great, thank you. We do have the results into our last poll. Do you currently feel safe in your environment? 36% said yes, 64% said no. Going to an online question from Jason. Eric, maybe you can help us with this one. But what can we, the public, do to help police in terms of thwarting carjacking?
Just as the gentleman was doing for volunteering, but I'll say on the individual side, be aware of your surroundings. We are so inundated right now with distractions, mostly our cell phones. We're got our face buried in our cell phones, looking at social media, posting on social media. We aren't paying attention to our surroundings. When you're out and about, whether it be walking or even in your vehicle, you need to know where you are, what's around you. Pay attention to who's around you. When you're coming home or you're leaving your house in the morning, you step out on your front porch or out your front door, you should be looking up and down and all around to see what looks out of place before you step towards your car. Same thing if you're driving home. There's no harm in you circling your block once or twice to make sure no car is following you. When you go into a gas station, before you step out of that vehicle, you are looking around or as you're pulling into it to see what looks out of place. Are there multiple people staying around that shouldn't be there? Is there a car with people just waiting there, not doing anything? That might signal some trouble. So it's the best thing that you can do to help us is to not be distracted while you're out and about. The next thing is, if you can, there are strength in numbers. Whether that's not saying like I say, we're not advocating for anyone to put themselves in harm's way, but strength in numbers is just try not to travel alone if at all possible, even in your vehicle or while walking on the street. It's better to be with someone than not. That means 2 people aware versus 1. You don't make yourself a greater target. Those are some of the things that you can do. Just simply being aware of your surroundings is the most important thing that you can do to prevent yourself from being a victim.
And Eric, I'd also like to add, be reasonable. Nothing good happens anywhere after a certain time of night. So if possible, if you can be proactive and get in your gas during daylight hours or early evening hours, or again, utilize some of the services that these community groups are providing in selecting where you get gas, where you know that the presence of positive individuals and assistance is available, also helps you in dealing with this crisis right now, and also increases your vigilance.
Great, thank you, gentlemen. Our next poll question, is there a strong local police presence in your community? Press 1 for yes, press 2 for no, press 3 for not sure. Again, is there a strong local police presence in your community? Press 1 for yes, 2 for no, and 3 for not sure. And Eric, this one is for you again. It is from Miller. Will there be additional police presence in heavily hit areas?
Yes, there is. Right now, as I said, we've started a new vehicle carjacking task force, but also our community safety team, which is our citywide teams. We have increased their patrols and presence in the top 10 districts that are experiencing the highest rise in vehicular carjacking as well as other violent crime. So you will see that and should be seeing that right now. We've increased that patrol and presence substantially since the beginning of the year.
Great, thank you, Eric. We're going to head back to the phone where we have Kimberly from Chicago. Kimberly, you're live. Go ahead and ask your question, please. Kimberly, are you with us?
Hello. I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Go ahead and ask your question, please.
My question and comment is, one of the things that I noticed years ago, because I had a son, is that once he turned the age of 13, there were no programs available for children in his age group. So you go to the park district, you go to the town halls, you look at outsourcing, and it was not available. For me, it worked quite favorably because my son had the option of traveling, which he did with both sides of the family. But for inner city kids in particular, they have nothing to deter them from following prey to those who have ill will. Latchkey kids are so prevalent now because we have so many young parents who don't believe in the village. So that is a huge concern, and I'm active in community meetings and community walks and different things, and it's a constant conversation, but it's a conversation that seems to fall on deaf ears when those that have the powers to be to say, we're not going to invest $5 million in beautifying Chicago, but we're going to put it in the educational system and in the programs that children need so that they thrive in life and in the community. It's a hard line to toe, and it makes it so difficult to combat that because we see it so often. We see where our schools are lacking. And in the perception is, if the system and those that are in power don't make the change to make their lives better and to show them a different path, then it is mute. That's the first thing. The second thing that I think is critical is, okay, the carjackings are happening. The police can only do so much. Community involvement is necessary. When we're not involved, we show fear to those that are not doing as they should, and we fall prey to that. So we have to be loud and boisterous in our block clubs and in the community, and not just rely on the police, because they have to go home to their families and there's no telling what they deal with. And then here we are again having these issues. So I have like a lot of passion, a lot of stuff surrounding this, simply because we have parents that have to work, right? We also have neighbors and communities that need to thrive. But when we go up and down the street and we see that they're shutting down businesses left and right, and they don't have anything to look to, what does that say for our community? What does it say for the people in the community? And what does it say about the way resources are being issued all around us? So it's bigger than just figuring out whose influence they're under. It's having something that they can thrive in, a community they can thrive in, and things that they can absolutely do. Lastly, probably not really lastly, but another huge impact to a lot of this is just that it is so hard to talk to some of these young folks. And that's half our battle, knowing how to connect with them when we see the odds, and they don't need to just see us when it's time for reprimand, but at all times. So just a lot of strong feelings I have about it.
And I have heard. Great. Kimberly, let's give our panel a chance to respond, shall we?
Okay.
Who would like to take that, folks?
Can I jump in real first with the Kimberly privilege, since we share a name? You're so right on all of this. I used to be an assistant in juvenile court, an assistant state's attorney, and I'll never forget a mother who came to me on a case where her son got a diversion. That he had done something, and she said, I don't want him to get a diversion. I want him to come through the system because that's the only way he can get services. And it broke my heart. And I was explaining to her, well, if he did this diversion, he wouldn't have this record. And she said, you don't understand, ma'am. We don't have access to services. I was told that the best place to get services for my child was from the probation department. That is, I think, one of the most stinging indictments of how we invest in our young people in our system, and how our return on that investment is so poor. It's so poor. With the only place that we can really engage young people who are going down this path is after they've done a harm, and then we pour resources like counseling, like job training, like additional, education support, is once we've identified them after they've been in trouble. And so I think you're absolutely right. And the way that we're going to get through this crime issue that is persistent in so many of our neighborhoods is multi-pronged. It is not just law enforcement. We're here for that piece, but it is investment in economics, education, really the neighborhood. I grew up in the projects of Cook County, Chicago. I'm very fortunate that I've been able to survive. And people say to me all the time, how did you do that? How did you survive Cabrini? And that is based on the supposition that people in neighborhoods like the one I grew up in aren't supposed to survive, because all of those things that we know are failing them continue to exist. And so you're absolutely right. It's always my hope in these conversations that we talk about the end result, which is crime and violence, as the offshoot of these other things. And if we don't invest in fixing the front end of this, all of us on this call will continue to have a job because we'll keep responding in the aftermath. But the power to really fundamentally change this works in building up our community so that people can thrive.
I'll add to that. I was going to make my comment, but, when I was a kid, 53rd Street, the YMCA, basketball every Saturday, and swimming, and roller skating, and then eventually tennis, and then on to college as well to play sports. And then, I come from a single parent, and, you hear kids say, well, my dad's in prison, and my mother's got issues. Everyone has them. But when a coach gets involved with a child and mentors, and that's why I think in my case, it was coaches in basketball at Kenwood and all throughout my life. And I'll tell you, I've tried to do the same, but she's right. We got to give these kids something different to look forward to doing as opposed to the criminality that they're enjoying. And I don't think they're having fun doing it. It's just that's the only thing that they know. So that's why when I mentioned Mark One and the Mirai Can and the many different foundations that are trying to help kids out here, we got to get them back involved in those organizations. I was a Cub Scout or Weeblos, and by the time I was a Boy Scout, it wasn't very cool anymore. But those organizations help teach kids values, and those values train them through their lives. And so we've got to get back to that. So I agree with the young lady. Locking them up is not the answer. I'll give you a quick example. There was a gentleman, a police officer, who held helicopters as a hobby. And when he got back to his warehouse, he saw two kids dangling from the window trying to break in. So he pulled them in through the window and started driving them. And they said, well, where are we going? He said, we're not going to jail. We're going to my warehouse where I keep my helicopters, and you're going to work. And he taught them how to work on helicopters. And then 15 years later, a kid knocks on his door and says, I'm a pilot. And it's because of her teaching me, I became a pilot and not a criminal. So those are the kind of alternatives we have to make. Diversion is fine, the term, but you got to get in a kid's life and say, this is how you're going to change. And I'm here to do that with anyone on this panel that would like to call upon me. I'm not employed. I'm volunteering to do it. So I'd be happy to find a way to work with each one of your organizations.
Great, thank you. We do have the results to our last poll. Is there a strong local police presence in your community? 35% said yes, 42% said no, and 23% said not sure. We do have a question from Keith. How can I help the Community Pump Initiative?
The first thing you can do is come out on Saturday, which is going to be a tough one because it's Super Bowl Sunday weekend. So from 11 to 1 this Saturday, we'll start out at 52nd and Lake Park, and then from there we'll disperse to areas around the city. And if there are those that want to come and join support and find ways that we can work with their communities, we'd be more than happy to organize that. As I said, communityfirst2021@gmail.com is our email address. And at that location, you can send us requests for service. And, of course, we volunteer, and we are asking for volunteers this weekend. So it's going to be a tough weekend with the Super Bowl.
There's also a community safe pump being organized by Alderman Coleman in the 16th Ward. So she's got that along with Kate Security. They're providing security at certain pumps in the 16th Ward. So you might want to try and reach out to your local alderman to see if they're organizing something similar in your different wards around the city. But there are different initiatives being taken place throughout the city where the aldermen are partnering with some of their special security initiatives in their wards to provide that during the upcoming days and weeks.
Great, thank you. Last poll question of the evening. Is there a community neighbors watch group in your area? And if so, has it helped? Please press 1 for yes, 2 for no, 3 for not sure. Again, is there a community neighbors watch group in your area? And if so, has it helped? One last question for the evening. Actually, they wanted to know, Michelle wants to know if you could repeat the email address to contact for gas stations. As we talked about a little bit earlier this meeting.
It's communityfirst2021@gmail.com. And thank you.
Great, thank you so much. We're going to actually get our quick results from the poll. Is there a community neighbors watch group in your area? And if so, has it helped? 18% said yes, 43% said no, and 39% said they are not sure. So as we come to a close this evening, I would like to give a special thanks to our guests and the residents who called in with their questions tonight. If we were unable to air your questions, please feel free to contact Congressman Rush's office at 773-779-2400. Again, that's 773-779-2400. I'd now like to turn it over to Congressman Rush for his closing remarks for this evening. Congressman?
Well, thank you, Letitia. Thank you, all you superb panelists. You have made this evening so valuable and so informative, and my heart just goes out to you in generosity. And thank you so very, very much for joining us this evening and for sharing questions and providing answers. I want to thank all the callers and the constituents, those who had so many remarkable questions that I hope you got answers to your questions. Finally, if you have any additional comments or any additional questions that you were unable to ask or to share, please do not hesitate to call my office. Once again, that number is 773-779-2400. That's 773-779-2400. With that, I want to wish everybody a good night. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and stay vigilant or stay aware of your surroundings. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for having us. Appreciate being on.
The Access Live event has ended.
Thank you for participating in my virtual town hall event. If you would like to leave a question or a comment, please do so after the tone. Thanks again.